so now, this idea of vivification, okay, this is something I talk about in the book. How do you make a scene more real? Okay. Asking questions like, look at the pajamas that you're wearing. Please describe them. What do you have on your feet? Tell me the layout of the apartment. Okay. What was the back door like? When you walked out in the backyard, what did you see? All of these things are vivifying the experience, and they're inviting the recall to be more vivid. Whether it's accurate or not doesn't matter. It can be accurate, but in essence, it's absorbing the person in the experience. And if we think about the steps of a hypnotic induction, okay, fixate attention, depotentiate conscious sense, facilitate an unconscious search, activate unconscious processes, and it manifests in hypnotic responsiveness. So she's talking about being on the phone. What color is the phone? And do you remember that sort of pale olive green color of phones in the old days? It was one of those, and was it on the wall, or was it, no, it was on a little table by the kitchen. Okay, and did it have a long cord or a short cord? It had a long cord so you could walk around. And she's describing all this. And now the opposing mirror piece. Here's a 9-year-old child who is terrified. She's in an unfamiliar place, all by herself. She has no idea what's going on with her parents. What does a person like that, what does a child like that need at that moment? Class.
To feel safe.
Yeah. How does a 9-year-old feel safe?
Their mother, their parents.
Right. Some protective, supportive adults. So now I'm working with a 38-year-old woman, graduate, law degree, employed, married. Okay. She's got a whole host of resources. And this is the opposing mirror intervention. This is where, and you can shaggy dog this all day long. Shaggy dogging is the way of telling a story to communicate a point. The technical description of a shaggy dog is that the story seems like it's going someplace. And when you get to the climax, it's kind of like, If you want a great shaggy dog, look up Mark Twain's Shaggy Dog. Jim Blaine's Grandfather's Ram is the classic shaggy dog story. If we have time at the end and you want to hear it, I'm happy to tell it to you, but not for now. But you can structure this opposing mirror in all kinds of ways. So for example, when I was a freshman in college, I was walking down the hall of my dorm. And you know when you have that sense that somebody's nearby, right? Well, I turn around and there's 6'2" Dan Svensson, you know, this kind of Swedish guy from northern Wisconsin, and he's sort of looming over, looking at the top of my head. And I'm like, Dan, what are you doing? He says, I'm looking for the horns. What? He said, well, you're Jewish, aren't you?
Yeah.
He said, yeah. Northern Wisconsin, Jews have horns. Until you meet one. So anyway, that sense that when somebody's close to you and you recognize their presence, and I'm just using that as an associative link to the idea of inviting her to bring her adult self into this home in California where this 9-year-old child is on the phone in a panic. And the invitation is to just be in the room. And you can see the room that you described, and you can go through what they've told you, because you're vivifying the experience, and you want them, and it's almost like a double dissociation. You want the person who's coming in as a resource for this young child, who is actually a part of themselves, to serve as a resource for them. And so the invitation of the two mirrors that just stay there and let me know when you're aware that she's aware of your presence. And this invites that first image. And you can have that moment where you see somebody and maybe the pupils dilate a little bit. And then here's where we as clinicians can kind of guide the interaction. So for example, now she's terrified, right? Tag question, bobblehead response, yes. And you understand that, don't you? Shift in the tone of voice, lulling, soothing, comforting, because that's what we're working towards here. We're orchestrating an intervention of soothing and comforting. And so we model it in the use of ourselves and our voice. So the idea that, you know, she's really scared, isn't she? Yeah. And you can just beam at her. It's okay. You're going to be okay. I'm going to take care of you. And again, I'm seeding for the idea of what I want her to be able to offer this child. And I'm speaking in a very kind of matter-of-fact way. Because if I walk into a room where there's a scared 9-year-old, I'm not gonna walk, "Hey, Billy, how you doing?" I'm gonna hang back. And when Billy happens to glance at me, I may say, "Hey, man." And I'm gonna be low-key, and I'm gonna keep it easy. And then there's that point where that little girl gets a bit curious. Who are you? Where'd you come from? Do you know where my mommy is? And again, this is all what we as clinicians can do. It's simply imagining yourself in the situation. If you know where you're going, if your strategic intent is to provide soothing for that child in that moment, and you know clinically that that child is not a real child, but you know that that child is a part of this woman who's sitting in your office who was talking about having a feeling of a pit in the pit of her stomach that she equates with loneliness. You're looking to heal. This is the hypnotic therapies. You're looking to heal that experience. And in so doing, you're pendulating back and forth with the metaphor of the opposing mirrors. And you can shaggy dog this all day long. Because there's that moment where this little girl, and we've got a name for her, I don't remember what the name, we call her Sally. Sally begins to look at you with a look of familiarity. There's something about you that I know. I don't know what, but I know. And when you see that look on her face, you can smile. And when she sees you smile, she knows that she's safe. And when you can see the impact of your smile on her knowing that she's safe, you can feel really good about yourself as a caregiver, can't you? And you just build up back and forth. And you're using the idea of the opposing mirrors to take that pendulating of this part, that part. What impact is, so in the infant social development world, if you're looking at an interaction, we can do it in the adult world. If you're looking at an interaction, say, "Oh, my hand made that noise." Okay, but before that noise happened, my hand was in motion. Well, before my hand was in motion, the neurons that control the muscles in my arm that move my hand were in action. So is this infinite time series regression moving back and forth in time? We're doing the same thing, but we're moving forward in time. As the interaction develops, what's happening between the two of you? At what point do you begin to speak to her? And having been in that experience, you have an exquisite appreciation for what she needs to hear, don't you? And then you can begin to give voice to that right now. And so she begins to tell her, "It's okay. Your mommy went to get your daddy, and they'll both be home in a short while. And wasn't that lady on the phone, that operator, that woman that you spoke to when you pressed the O on the phone? And boy, are you a smart little girl that you knew to press O. Wasn't she a nice lady?" And the little girl's going to start to nod. Because this woman's already told me how relieving it was to have that woman stay on the phone with her the whole time. So I have knowledge about the interaction that I utilize, that I bring into the interaction to augment it, to bolster it, to enhance it, to make it more impactful. And then the little girl can begin to express the little girl's curiosity. Who are you? That's a really good question. Because I think you have an idea of who I am, don't you? And she'll say, "But no." And you can smile, and you can shake your head, and you can say, "Yeah." And she'll say, "But that can't happen." And you can just quietly say, "Really?" Because now you're being the caregiver to this little girl. And you've gotten her trust, and you're creating a relationship with her. And you can go on and on for as long as you like, or until your 45 minutes runs out, whichever works for you. And then you can begin to sort of see the way that this little girl can take this in. That she is such a clever little girl. And that even in the midst of her raw terror, that she was left all alone, that mommy and daddy were gone, and she didn't know what happened, that she had the wisdom. She had the intelligence. She had the presence of mind to call, "Oh." And wasn't it great that you did something and you got such a profound impact? And again, you're gonna bring this language down to the level of a 9-year-old. You don't wanna talk to a 9-year-old like you're talking to an adult, because that's gonna kind of fuzz that dissociation that you've been working to create. And, you know, this is, for those of you who are familiar with Erickson's story about the February man, okay, this is a woman who was a nurse who had a fear of water. And she had no idea where the fear of water came from. And Erickson regresses her back to the period of childhood, and he comes to visit her on a regular basis. And they dub him the February man because it happens to be February when he comes to visit her. And he hypnotically regresses her and then hypnotically grows her up. And so that when she encounters the life event that triggered the fear of water, Erickson has successfully implanted the resources that allow her to overcome that experience so that it's no longer traumatic when she encounters it. And then as she continues to grow back into real life, she's no longer traumatized by the episode because the memory of the experience has been altered, because the resources she brought to the experience hypnotically allowed her to re-experience the traumatic event in a non-traumatic fashion. So the need to be fearful of water as an adult has gone away. So this is just a very, listen, I'm standing on the shoulders of a lot of people here, including good old Father Jim back there. So this is just, I mean, at this point, it's just a matter of your clinical creativity. What do you understand about this human being? What's the issue that they're struggling with? What are the resources that they need to have implanted, quote unquote, okay? And then there's a way that you can cultivate, so this is also, it's a variant of object relations theory, right? These are all internal relationships. And so you can begin to play with the idea of how does that internal relationship change as a result of this interaction between the two of you. Would you mind closing the windows? It's getting a little chilly. Thank you. And so at some point, you want to bring these two closer and closer together. You want this little girl to feel that she has the resources. You want to build on the strength that she has. You want this woman to realize that she's not alone. And in a most literal sense, as she incorporates this child back into herself, this theoretically repaired child, then that feeling in the pit of her stomach that began this whole process, that's rooted in a feeling of loneliness, that she tags back to this incident. Now, I don't have to believe, that being abandoned by my parents at age 9 in Los Angeles is the core of my sense of loneliness in the world. I could pick lots of things that this woman has described to me and say, well, gee, that could be the basis, or that could be the basis for loneliness. What I believe about this isn't relevant. What she believes about this, how she responds to the implantation of the resources and the healing of growing that child up with those resources, as opposed to being the frightened kid who continues to grow up into the adult Sarah who's sitting in my office. Does this make sense?